In the heart of Seattle, where luxury cars cruise past forgotten alleyways, a story of deception and destiny is about to unfold. Michael Bennett owns nothing but a weathered toolkit and an unwavering sense of dignity. For 15 years he's lived on these streets, fixing anything with an engine, never asking for more than a kind word in return. He doesn't know that Sarah Morrison, worth $8.6 billion, has spent the last 6 months in disguise, orchestrating chance encounters with potential suitors across the city. She's searching for something her empire of tech companies can't build, genuine love. But when their worlds collide over a broken timing belt, neither realizes they're about to spark a chain of events that will challenge everything they believe about worth, pride, and the true price of happiness. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun hadn't yet risen over Seattle's skyline when Michael Bennett emerged from his makeshift shelter beneath the Alaskan Way viaduct. His movements were practiced, efficient, the routine of a man who had learned to live with less, but hadn't learned to live with less dignity. From the worn duffel bag that served as his pillow, he retrieved a carefully wrapped bundle. His toolkit, each tool cleaned and organized despite the scratched surface of the red metal box. The certification card in his wallet was so faded the expiration date had become illegible, but Michael could still make out his name and the ASE Master Technician designation he'd earned 15 years ago. He touched it briefly, a morning ritual that reminded him of who he was before life took an unexpected turn. "Morning, Mr. B," called out Jenny, a teenager who lived in the tent 2 spaces down with her mother. "Think you could look at Mom's a portable heater? It's making funny noises again." Michael's face softened. "Give me 5 minutes to wash up, Jenny. I'll be right there." The public restroom at the nearby park had become his morning sanctuary. He kept himself clean, his graying beard neatly trimmed with scissors from his toolkit. The face that looked back at him from the scratched mirror was weathered but alert, blue eyes still sharp despite the creases around them. He'd learned long ago that cleanliness was a form of resistance against circumstances, a way to keep his humanity when the world seemed determined to strip it away. Back at the encampment, Michael knelt beside Jenny's mother's heater. His hands moved with the certainty of decades of experience, diagnosing the problem by sound and touch before even opening the casing. "Just some debris in the fan," he explained, carefully cleaning it out. "Should run quiet now, but if it starts acting up again, come find me." He refused the $5 Jenny's mother tried to press into his hand. "Save it for something you need," he said, the same response he gave to anyone in the community who tried to pay him. Here, under the shadow of the city's towers of wealth, they all looked out for each other in whatever way they could. The rest of his morning followed its usual pattern. He helped old Joe secure a loose wheel on his cart, showed Maria how to fix the zipper on her tent, and tighten the chain on Tommy's salvaged bicycle. Each repair was an opportunity to teach, to pass on knowledge that might help someone else keep going for one more day. It wasn't until noon that Michael made his way to his usual spot near the auto repair shops along 4th Avenue. He'd chosen this location carefully years ago, close enough to be seen, far enough away not to threaten their business. Sometimes, when customers balked at the shop's prices, the mechanics would quietly point them toward Michael. He charged only what people could afford, sometimes nothing at all, and his work was always solid. The weight of his toolkit as he walked was comforting, each tool inside a testament to his refusal to sell them even in the hardest times. They were more than implements. They were his identity, his connection to a world that had once respected him, his means of maintaining his self-worth when everything else had been stripped away. As he settled into his spot, Michael pulled out the automotive manual he'd rescued from a recycling bin. Its pages were dog-eared, annotated with his neat handwriting in the margins, updated with information gleaned from watching YouTube videos. On the public library's computers, In this rapidly changing world of hybrid engines and computer diagnostics, he was determined not to let his knowledge become as obsolete as his certification card. Sarah Morrison's day began at 4:30 a.m., long before her executive assistant would arrive with the day's schedule. She stood in front of her closet, not in the master suite of her penthouse where designer clothes worth millions hung untouched, but in the modest apartment she'd rented downtown under an assumed name. Here, she transformed herself into the woman she wished she could be, just another face in the crowd. The silver pendant around her neck caught the early morning light. It was simple, worn smooth by years of worried touches, the last gift from her mother before cancer took her. "Remember who you are," her mother had said, "not what you own." Sarah hadn't understood then, at 16, already an heiress to a tech fortune. Now, at 34, those words haunted her. She pulled on jeans, a plain sweater, and minimal makeup. Her armor of invisibility. The woman who stared back from the mirror looked nothing like the polished CEO who graced magazine covers. That was exactly the point. 2 hours later, she sat at the head of Morrison Tech's boardroom table, power suit perfect, every hair in place. The transformation was complete. "Miss Morrison," Henderson, her CFO, cleared his throat. "The board has some concerns about your continued single status." Sarah's fingers instinctively found her mother's pendant beneath her silk blouse. "My personal life is not up for discussion, James." "With all due respect," he persisted, "stability in leadership includes personal stability. The Chung family has expressed interest in a merger, and their son—" "No," the word cut through the air like a blade. "I won't be arranging my marriage like a corporate merger. Your father always said—" "My father built this company from nothing," Sarah interrupted, her voice steady but sharp. "He also taught me that true innovation comes from understanding real people, not just spreadsheets. Now, shall we discuss the actual agenda?" The meeting proceeded, but Sarah's mind kept drifting to her other life, the one where she spent months, orchestrating accidental meetings with men from different walks of life. None had seen past the carefully crafted facade of a middle-class woman looking for love. They'd all revealed their true characters quickly enough: gold diggers, status seekers, or simply unable to handle a woman who challenged their assumptions. Later, in her private office, she unlocked the bottom drawer of her desk. Inside lay a journal, its pages filled with her mother's elegant handwriting. "Love isn't found in boardrooms or bank accounts," one entry read. "It's found in moments of truth, when masks fall away." Sarah traced the words with her fingertip. Her mother had married her father when he was still a struggling programmer with big dreams, working out of their garage. They'd built everything. Together, equal partners in life and business. That was what Sarah wanted. Someone who would see her, not her net worth. Her phone buzzed. Another carefully planned chance encounter was scheduled for tomorrow. Sarah closed her mother's journal and stood to leave, pausing at the floor-to-ceiling windows. Seattle sprawled below, a maze of possibilities. Somewhere out there, she hoped, was someone real. What she didn't know was that fate had its own plans, far different from her carefully orchestrated ones. The next day's encounter wouldn't be with the carefully vetted candidate her team had selected. Instead, it would be with a man who owned nothing but a toolkit and his dignity, and it would change everything. Sarah's chosen vehicle for her encounters was a deliberate statement of middle-class reliability, a 3-year-old Camry, silver, neither too new nor too old. Her team had carefully selected this particular model, even adding a few minor scratches to make it more believable. Today, they'd arranged for a sophisticated mechanical issue that would require skill to diagnose but wouldn't leave her stranded. The timing belt had been carefully altered to show signs of wear while remaining safe. It would make a distinctive noise, enough to concern any mechanic, but not enough to cause immediate failure. Sarah had memorized her cover story, a marketing consultant running late for a client meeting. But plans, no matter how carefully crafted, have a way of unraveling. The first sign that today would be different came when her car stuttered 3 blocks earlier than planned. The second was the strange burning smell that definitely wasn't part of the orchestrated breakdown. Sarah felt a moment of genuine panic. As she guided the car to the curb, her practiced damsel-in-distress act forgotten in the face of actual distress. She was nowhere near the upscale auto shop where her team had planted their pre-screened candidate. Instead, she found herself in a grittier part of downtown, where the gleaming office buildings gave way to repair shops and warehouses. Bennett had been watching the Camrys approach with professional interest. Even from his spot on the corner, he could hear the distinctive sound of a timing belt on its last legs. But there was something else, a sound that suggested a more immediate problem he debated approaching. Experience had taught him that well-dressed women rarely welcomed help from homeless men, no matter their expertise. He'd learned to wait, to be asked, to let his reputation speak for itself. But the smoke now curling from under the hood made the decision for him. "Ma'am," he called out, keeping his distance, "you need to turn off your engine right now." Sarah looked up, startled. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. The man approaching her wasn't the clean-cut mechanic her team had vetted. This man wore layers of worn but clean clothing, carried a battered toolkit, and moved with the cautious dignity of someone used to being turned away. "The timing belt's not your biggest problem," Michael continued, his voice professional despite his appearance. "That burning smell suggests your alternator's seizing up. If you keep running the engine, you'll end up with bigger issues." Sarah's hand hesitated over the key. Everything about this moment was wrong. Wrong place, wrong person, wrong problem. Yet something in the man's voice, the quiet authority of genuine expertise, made her turn off the engine. Michael kept his movements slow and deliberate as he approached. "Mind if I take a look?" "No charge," he added quickly, seeing her hesitation. "Just don't want to see you end up stranded with a dead battery on top of everything else." Sarah found herself nodding, both unnerved and intrigued by this deviation from her carefully scripted plan. As she watched him pop the hood with practiced ease, she realized this might be the first genuine moment she'd experienced in months of orchestrated encounters. The irony wasn't lost on her. In trying to manufacture authenticity, she'd stumbled into the real thing. Michael's hands moved with practiced precision as he examined the engine compartment. From his toolkit, he extracted a specialized tool, one he'd modified himself years ago to better access tight spaces in modern engines. The worn handle was wrapped with electrical tape, hiding the hours of grinding and reshaping that had transformed it from a standard wrench into something uniquely efficient. "Did you notice any electrical issues before the burning smell?" he asked, his tone purely professional. "Flickering lights? Radio cutting out?" Sarah found herself responding honestly, forgetting her rehearsed script. "Yes, actually, the dashboard lights dimmed a few times this morning. I thought it was just one of those things." Michael finished, a slight smile touching his eyes. That's how most serious problems start. People ignore the little warnings until they become big ones. He straightened up, wiping his hands on a surprisingly clean rag from his pocket. "Your alternator's failing. The timing belt is also showing wear, but that's not what caused your breakdown. The real problem is that when the alternator started going, it put extra stress on everything else." Sarah watched him explain, struck by how his entire demeanor transformed when discussing mechanics. Gone was the cautious, reserved, homeless man. In his place stood an expert who knew exactly what he was talking about. "See this?" he pointed. "With his modified tool. The alternator pulley is seized. That's what caused the burning smell. You're lucky you stopped when you did. A few more minutes and it could have caught fire." "Can you fix it?" Sarah asked, genuinely curious now. Michael hesitated, running a mental inventory of what he'd need. "I can, but not here on the street. You'll need a new alternator, and it's not a 5-minute swap on this model." He glanced at her clothes, clearly expensive despite her attempts at dressing down. There's a reputable shop 3 blocks down that I'd recommend. Why not you? The words came out before Sarah could stop them. Michael's expression shifted, pride warring with practicality. Ma'am, I may know what I'm doing, but I work on the street. Most people aren't comfortable. I am, Sarah interrupted. If you can fix it, I'd like you to. She gestured to his modified tool. Anyone who takes the time to customize their tools that precisely clearly knows their craft. Michael blinked, surprised both by her observation and her trust. He studied her face for any sign of pity or condescension, but found only genuine respect. It'll take a few hours, he said finally, and you'll need to get the part. I know what you need, but I can't exactly maintain an inventory out here. Sarah nodded, already pulling out her phone. Tell me exactly what to order, and... She glanced around. Where should we have it delivered? There's a garage 2 blocks over. Owner's name is Pete. He lets me use a corner of his lot sometimes. When the job's too big for roadside work, he'll hold the part if you have it sent there. As Michael gave her the specifications for the alternator, their fingers briefly brushed when he showed her the worn part. In that moment, something shifted. A spark of connection that had nothing to do with engines or alternators. Sarah felt it too. For the first time in all her orchestrated encounters, she was having a genuine conversation with someone who neither knew nor cared about her wealth. The irony wasn't lost on her, that this unplanned meeting felt more real than all her carefully arranged ones combined. You know, Michael said, closing the hood, most people don't notice the modified tools. They just see, he gestured vaguely, at himself. Most people don't look past the surface of anything, Sarah replied softly, touching her mother's pendant beneath her blouse. Their loss. While they waited for the part to arrive, Sarah made a call that had nothing to do with alternators. Her assistant, the only person who knew about her double life, was already working on a cover story. Within 20 minutes, a new business identity existed. Complete Care Auto, a small garage supposedly owned by Sarah's alternative persona. Michael spent the time organizing his toolkit, each movement precise and purposeful. He'd agreed to let her buy him a coffee from the shop across the street, but only after she accepted his explanation that he'd pay her back from the repair fee. The cup sat cooling beside him as he worked, a reminder of boundaries carefully maintained. I own a small garage, Sarah said as she returned from another phone call. She held out a freshly printed business card, simple, unassuming, yet professional. Complete Care Auto was printed in modest blue letters with an address in a working-class neighborhood. We could use someone with your expertise. Michael stared at the card, not reaching for it. Ma'am, Sarah, she corrected gently. Sarah, he acknowledged, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I can't. This isn't charity, she interrupted, her voice firm. I've seen your work, your attention to detail. That modified tool you're using, that shows innovation and problem-solving. I need that kind of thinking in my shop. Michael's fingers traced the worn handle of the tool in question. It's not that simple. I don't have a permanent address. My certification expired years ago. My situation can be worked around, Sarah finished. We'll start with contract work, per repair. You can use the shop's address for paperwork. As for certification, she smiled, I'm willing to pay for renewal courses if you're willing to take them. The new alternator arrived before Michael could respond, delivered to Pete's garage as arranged. As they walked the 2 blocks, Sarah could see him wrestling with the offer. Pride warred with practicality in every line of his body. Pete's garage was exactly what you'd expect. Worn concrete floors, tools organized with casual efficiency, the smell of oil and metal in the air. Pete himself, a burly man in his 60s, just nodded when they arrived. Corners free, Mike, he said, gesturing to a workspace partially hidden by a stack of tires. Heard you found a seized alternator. Thanks, Pete. Michael's response was quiet but carried weight. Here was someone who saw him as a mechanic first, his circumstances second. Sarah watched as Michael set up his workspace, noting how even Pete seemed to defer to his expertise. This wasn't just about fixing cars, this was about restoration, about seeing the value in things others had discarded. As Michael began the repair, his movements sure and practiced, Sarah modified her approach. 2 weeks, she said. Contract basis. You work when you want, get paid for what you do. No strings, no obligations. After that, we can both decide if it's working. Michael's hands stilled over the engine. Why? Because good mechanics are hard to find, Sarah answered truthfully. And great ones. Ones who can turn standard tools into precision instruments, who can diagnose problems by sound and touch. They're even rarer. She placed the business card on his toolkit, next to a photograph she hadn't noticed before. It showed a younger Michael in front of a garage, wearing ASE certification patches with pride. The offer stands, she said softly. Think about it. You can call the number on the card anytime. What she didn't tell him was that the number would ring directly to her private line, or that the garage she'd just invented would be fully stocked and staffed by morning. Some deceptions, she told herself, were meant to restore rather than deceive. Michael stood outside Complete Care Auto at exactly 7:45 a.m., 15 minutes before his agreed-upon start time. The building surprised him. Not too new, not too run down, with a fresh coat of paint that suggested recent renovation rather than new construction. It looked, he realized, exactly like the kind of place someone like Sarah would own. He'd spent 3 days thinking about her offer, 3 days explaining to Jenny and the others at the encampment that he wasn't abandoning them. I'll still be around, he'd promised, just might have some better tools to help with. The weight of his toolkit felt different this morning. He'd cleaned every tool twice, though they were already immaculate. His clothes were fresh from the shelter's laundry service, his beard trimmed as neatly as he could manage. The door opened before he could reach for it. Sarah stood there, dressed casually but professionally, looking exactly as she had when they'd first met. "You're early," she smiled. "Come meet the team." Inside, the garage was a study in efficient organization. 3 bays, well lit and fully equipped. A small but tidy office space. A break room that smelled of fresh coffee. And most, surprisingly, 3 other mechanics, all busy with morning prep. "Everyone," Sarah called out. "This is Michael Bennett, our new specialist in European and Asian imports." The introduction caught him off guard. He hadn't told her about his specific expertise. A set of clean work overalls hung in an open locker, Mike embroidered above. The breast pocket. The sight of it, so normal, so professional, made his throat tight. "Bay 3 is yours," Sarah continued. "We've got a BMW 740i coming in at 9 with an electrical gremlin nobody else can trace. Thought you might like to start with something challenging." The other mechanics introduced themselves. Ray, a younger man with tattoos visible beneath. His sleeves, Maria, whose calloused hands spoke of years in the trade, and Tom, who looked to be about Michael's age and moved with the careful precision of someone who'd learned his craft in the military. "Coffee's always fresh," Tom said, handing Michael a mug. "Shop rule, and we all chip in for lunch orders." Michael took the mug automatically, its warmth grounding him in the surreal moment. "Thanks," he managed. As the others returned to their work, Sarah touched his arm lightly. "The locker's yours. Take whatever time you need to set up your bay. The BMW owner's been to 3 other shops. No pressure." But there was something in her voice, a hint of challenge that suggested she knew exactly what he could do. She'd seen it in that modified wrench, in the way he'd diagnosed her car's problems by sound alone. Michael changed into the overalls, the fabric stiff with newness. His reflection in the locker mirror showed a different man than the one who slept under the viaduct, not because of the clothes, but because of the purpose he could feel returning to his posture. He arranged his tools on the bay's workbench, supplementing them with the shop's equipment. Each placement was deliberate, creating a workspace that felt like an extension of himself. When the BMW pulled in at 9, he was ready. The owner, a frustrated executive type, started explaining the problem, But Michael was already listening to the engine's idle, his trained ear catching the subtle irregularities that most would miss. "Give me an hour," he said, with the quiet confidence that came from decades of experience. "I think I know what's wrong." From her office, Sarah watched through the windows as Michael began his diagnostic process. She saw the other mechanics gradually drift over, drawn by his methodical approach and the sure way he traced the electrical problem to its source. What she didn't expect was the warmth in her chest when she saw him smile, really smile, as he walked the BMW's owner through what he'd found. For the first time, she wondered if she was the one in danger of being deceived, not by him, but by her own heart. 2 weeks passed in a blur of diagnostic tests, repair jobs, and quiet victories. Michael's bay had become the go-to spot for the problems no one else could solve. Complex electrical issues, mysterious engine noises, hybrid system failures. They all found their way to his corner of the garage. Even more telling were the thank-you notes that began appearing, each one carefully preserved in a folder on Sarah's desk. "Mr. Bennett saved my car and my bank account," one customer had written. 3 other shops wanted to replace the entire transmission. He found and fixed the real problem in 2 hours. Sarah found herself inventing reasons to be in the garage, watching Michael work. She told herself it was to maintain her cover as the owner, but she knew it was more than that. There was something compelling about the way he approached each problem, not just fixing cars, but teaching others as he worked. "See this?" she overheard him telling Ray one afternoon, hands deep in the engine bay of a Tesla. "The diagnostic computer says it's a battery management issue, but look at the wear pattern on these connections. Something's causing power fluctuations upstream." It wasn't just his technical knowledge that drew people to him. There was a quiet wisdom in the way he handled difficult customers, calming their fears without patronizing them. Sarah had seen automotive experts before. Her wealth had bought her access to the best, but Michael had something different, something that couldn't be taught in any certification course. One evening, after the other mechanics had left, Sarah found Michael meticulously cleaning his tools, a habit, she'd learned, that dated back to his earliest days as an apprentice. "The BMW owner from last week sent this," she said, holding out. "Another thank you note. He's referred 3 other executives already." Michael wiped his hands before taking the note, his innate respect for paper evident in the gesture. As he read, Sarah studied his face in the soft evening light. The past 2 weeks had subtly changed him. His shoulders carried less tension. His eyes held more hope. "I had a shop like this once," he said quietly, surprising her. It was the first time he'd volunteered anything about his past. Not as well equipped, but it was mine. Until the recession hit, and I made the mistake of trying to save everyone's jobs by taking out loans I couldn't repay. Sarah's heart tightened. She wanted to tell him that she understood business, that she could help, that her billions could erase those old debts with a single phone call. Instead, she listened. "The hardest part wasn't losing the shop," he continued, his hands automatically returning to cleaning his tools. "It was letting down the people who trusted me, my employees, their families. I promised them I could keep things going." "You tried to protect them," Sarah said softly. "That's more than most would do." He looked up then, and something passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits, both carrying responsibilities they couldn't share, both wearing masks for different reasons. "Sarah," he began, then hesitated. "These past 2 weeks, I know this was probably just meant as a helping hand, but it wasn't," she interrupted, then caught herself. "I mean, yes, I wanted to help, but not for the reasons you might think. I saw something in you that day with my car. Something real." The word hung between them, heavy with irony she couldn't explain. Michael set down the wrench he'd been cleaning, his movements deliberate. "Real is dangerous," he said finally. "Real means letting people see who you are, scars and all." "Maybe that's exactly what some people are looking for," Sarah replied, her mother's pendant suddenly heavy against her chest. "Maybe the scars are what make us authentic." Their eyes met, and for a moment, all the carefully constructed walls, his pride, her deception, wavered. Sarah felt herself leaning forward slightly, drawn by something she hadn't planned for, hadn't orchestrated. The moment broke when Tom's voice echoed from the front of the garage. "Boss, got those parts orders you wanted to review?" Sarah stepped back, professional mask sliding back into place. But as she turned to leave, she saw Michael touch the thank you note gently, as if anchoring himself to this new reality he was building. The crisis came on a busy Friday afternoon, wrapped in midnight blue paint and wearing a Maserati badge. The cut report GTS belonged to a local tech executive, the kind of client who could make or break a garage's reputation with a single social media post. Ray had taken the job, confident after watching Michael handle similar high-end vehicles. But confidence couldn't replace experience, and in one heart-stopping moment, the car slipped off an improperly secured lift arm. The sound of metal scraping against metal filled the garage, followed by a silence more terrible than any crash. Michael moved before anyone else could react, his body sliding under the teetering vehicle to guide it safely down while shouting clear instructions to Ray. "Cut the lift power! Tom, get me the backup supports, now!" Sarah watched through the office window as the security cameras captured everything. Her heart caught in her throat as Michael risked his own safety to prevent disaster. When the car was finally secured, the damage was visible but contained. A deep scrape along the side panel, but no structural harm. Ray stood frozen, face drained of color. The client would arrive in an hour, expecting his $150,000 vehicle to be ready for a weekend trip. "I'll take responsibility," Ray said, his voice shaking. "It was my fault. I'll tell the owner." "No." Michael's voice cut through the tension. He was already examining the damage, his experienced hands moving over the scraped panel. "I was supervising. This happened on my watch." Sarah stepped out of the office, ready to intervene, to protect both her employees and her investment. But Michael caught her eye, a silent plea in his expression. This was about more than just a damaged car. "Give me 40 minutes, he told her. "Ray, you're going to help me fix this. Consider it a teaching moment." For the next half hour, Sarah watched as Michael guided Ray through an emergency repair process she'd never seen before. His hands moved with surgical precision, using techniques that spoke of years handling crisis situations with limited resources. Sometimes, she heard him tell Ray, it's not about having the right tools. It's about having the right approach, making things look right, even when they're not perfect. That's an art. The security camera footage played silently on her office monitor. She found herself rewinding it repeatedly, watching Michael's unhesitating response to the crisis. In those few seconds of footage, she saw everything that had drawn her to him. Not just skill, but character. When the owner arrived, Michael met him with calm professionalism. "Sir, we had an incident during service," he began, his honesty direct but carefully measured. "I take full responsibility." Sarah felt her phone buzz, her executive assistant trying to reach her about actual Morrison tech business. But she couldn't look away from the scene unfolding in her garage. Michael was handling the situation with a grace that made her own carefully orchestrated life feel hollow in comparison. The owner, initially furious, found himself responding to Michael's calm expertise, especially when Michael pointed out potential. Issues he'd discovered and addressed during the repair. Issues that could have caused problems during the planned weekend trip. "Send me the bill for the panel replacement," the owner finally said, notably calmer. "But I want you to handle the work personally." After the Maserati pulled away, Ray approached Michael, shame and gratitude warring on his face. "You didn't have to take the hit for me. Why did you?" Michael's answer was quiet but carried across the garage to where Sarah stood. "Because someone once did the same for me back when I was starting out. Sometimes people need a chance to learn from their mistakes without being crushed by them." Sarah touched the security camera footage frozen on her screen, her fingers tracing. Michael's outline as he dove under the falling car. In that moment of crisis, both of them had revealed truths about themselves, his instinct to protect others at his own expense, and her growing inability to maintain professional distance. The deception she'd crafted was beginning to feel like the heaviest burden she'd ever carried. The magazine had been left in the customer waiting area, an old copy of Forbes carelessly abandoned by a client. Michael might never have noticed it if Tom hadn't been flipping through it during lunch break. "Hey, boss!" Tom called out, his voice carrying across the garage. "Didn't know you had a twin." Sarah's heart stopped. She knew before turning what they'd found. It was the cover story from last year. America's Most Eligible CEO, Sarah Morrison's vision for the future. The photo showed her in her other life. Power suit, perfect makeup, the carefully cultivated image of a tech billionaire. Michael had been wiping his hands on a shop rag, preparing to head back to a transmission rebuild, but something in Sarah's expression as she turned made him look closer at the magazine. The rag dropped from suddenly nerveless fingers. The silence in the garage grew thick enough to cut. Tom glanced between the magazine and Sarah, confusion giving way to understanding. Ray and Maria stopped what they were doing, drawn by the tension crackling in the air. "I can explain," Sarah started, but the words felt hollow, even as she spoke them. Michael's face had gone completely still, the way it did when he was diagnosing a particularly difficult problem. But this wasn't a mechanical issue he could solve with tools and expertise. This was betrayal, wrapped in glossy paper and professional photography. 8.6 billion, he said quietly, reading from the article. Morrison Technologies, the entire West Coast tech industry at your fingertips. His eyes met hers, and the hurt there was worse than anger. "Was any of it real?" "All of it," Sarah said quickly, too quickly. "The garage, the work, what I saw in you, what you saw in me." Michael's voice had an edge she'd never heard before. What exactly was this? Some kind of social experiment? Rich CEO slumming it with the homeless mechanic? "No!" The denial burst from her with such force that everyone jumped. "This wasn't, I never meant." But Michael was already moving, his movements precise and controlled as he began packing his toolkit. Each tool went into its place with mechanical precision, the routine so ingrained it required no thought. This, Sarah realized with a sinking heart, was how he handled crisis, by falling back on the patterns that had kept him sane through everything else. "Michael, please," she tried again, "let me explain properly." He paused, one hand resting on his modified wrench, the tool that had first caught her attention, that had shown her who he really was. "Explain what? How you created this entire fiction, this garage, these jobs? Was anyone here even real, or are they all actors hired to play parts in your little drama?" The other mechanics shifted uncomfortably. They hadn't known Sarah's true identity either, but they weren't the target of her deception. They hadn't opened up to her, hadn't shared pieces of themselves thinking they were talking to someone who understood struggle. "The garage is real," Sarah said softly. "Everyone here is real. I bought it because I saw what you could do, what you could be if given a chance. The only fiction was me, and not all of me. Not the parts that matter." Michael closed his toolkit with a final decisive click. "The parts that matter," he repeated, "like your name, your life, the fact that you could buy and sell this entire block without denting your bank account." He shook his head. "You don't get to decide what parts of a lie matter to the person being lied to." He picked up his toolkit, the same one she'd first seen him with, though now it was supplemented with new tools from the garage. The weight of it seemed heavier somehow, as if it carried not just instruments, but the burden of broken trust. "Thank you for the opportunity," he said formally, his voice distant and professional. "I'll have my certification paperwork forwarded to a different address." Sarah watched him walk toward the door, her mother's pendant burning against her skin like an accusation. The magazine lay open on the counter, her other self staring up at her with confident eyes that had never known what it felt like to watch hope walk away. The week after Michael left, the garage felt like a house with its heart torn out. His bay stood empty, the precision-organized tools replaced by hollow silence. The work overalls with his name still hung in the locker, untouched, a ghost of possibilities lost. Sarah threw herself into her other life, burying herself in Morrison tech meetings and acquisitions. But even in the midst of billion-dollar decisions, her mind kept drifting to a worn toolkit and hands that could diagnose problems by touch alone. "The board is pleased with your increased presence," Henderson commented after a particularly long session. "They're hoping this means you've abandoned your unconventional approach to finding a partner." Sarah's fingers found her mother's pendant, its smooth surface offering no comfort today. "The board should focus on our AI development pipeline and leave my personal life alone." Meanwhile, Michael had returned to his spot under the viaduct, but nothing felt the same. The skills and confidence he'd rekindled at the garage remained, but they were now tainted by the bitter taste of deception. "You're different," Jenny observed one morning as he fixed her mother's heater again. "The garage changed you." "The garage wasn't real," he replied. But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't true. The work was real. The people he'd helped were real. The pride he'd felt was real. Only Sarah had been an illusion. Or had she? He kept remembering small moments, the way she'd light up watching him solve a difficult diagnostic puzzle. Her genuine interest in his modified tools, the quiet conversations at the end of long days. Had all of that been an act? Could anyone fake that level of authenticity? One afternoon, a sleek Tesla pulled up near his usual spot. The window rolled down to reveal Tom from the garage. "Still doing street repairs?" Tom asked casually, as if nothing had changed. Michael nodded warily. "Good. Got a client who specifically asked for you. Says nobody else could fix his Maserati, quite right?" The Maserati owner. The crisis that had shown him both at his best, and perhaps shown Sarah at hers too. Michael remembered her face that day, the genuine fear when he'd put himself at risk, the pride when he'd turned the situation around. "Tom," Michael started, "the garage. Was it all just for show? Were you all part of it?" "Hell no," Tom laughed. "She bought the place 2 days before you started, hired us all through regular channels. None of us knew who she really was either. But you know what's funny? She never once tried to change how we ran things. Just let us work, trusted our judgment. The only special treatment anyone got was you, and that was because you earned it." Michael's hand brushed against his toolkit, feeling the outline of his modified wrench through the worn canvas. The tool that had first caught her eye, that had made her see past his circumstances to his capabilities. Back in her office, Sarah stared at the empty bay through the window. The other mechanics were good, but they didn't have that extra something that had made Michael special. She pulled out her phone, looking at the pictures she'd secretly taken of his repairs. Not for surveillance, but because she'd been genuinely impressed by his innovative solutions. The abandoned overalls in his locker seemed to mock them both. Him for believing in a fresh start, her for thinking she could build something real on a foundation of lies. Yet the truth lingered in the empty spaces between them. The garage had been real, the work had been real, the connection had been real, everything except her name and bank account had been genuine. But in a world where trust was as precious as the dignity Michael had clung to all those years on the street, maybe those were the things that mattered most. Sarah sat in her penthouse office, surrounded by screens displaying everything her considerable resources could uncover about Michael Bennett. Her assistant had compiled a comprehensive file, but it was an old newspaper clipping that held her attention. Yellowed with age, but the headline still clear: "Local mechanic risks life to save 3 in shop fire." The article, dated 12 years ago, told a story that made her heart ache. Michael's original shop, Bennett's European Auto Service, had caught fire during business hours. He'd run back into the burning building 3 times, first for his elderly receptionist, then for a teenage apprentice, And finally, for a customer's child who'd been waiting in the lounge. The reporter had quoted the fire chief calling it nothing short of heroic. What the article didn't mention was what came after. Sarah's financial team had uncovered those details. The insurance company's denial of the claim due to a technicality, the loans Michael had taken out to rebuild, the desperate attempt to keep his employees paid during the reconstruction. When the recession hit months later, it had been a perfect storm of financial destruction. He never took bankruptcy, her accountant had noted with surprise. Sold everything he had, worked out payment plans with his creditors. He's been making small payments on those debts for over a decade, even from the streets. Another document caught her eye, a letter from one of his former employees. Mr. Bennett sold his own house to make payroll, it read. Kept us all working for 6 months while he lived in his car, trying to save the business. Never once complained, never made us feel guilty. Man's got more integrity than anyone I've ever known. Sarah's fingers traced the newspaper photo of a younger Michael, his face smudged with soot, but his eyes clear and determined. It was the same expression she'd seen when he dove under the Maserati, that unflinching willingness to put others first. Her computer pinged with an alert. Her team had found more recent records. Small payments made to various charities from Michael's minimal street repair earnings. Women's shelters, youth programs, even the local animal rescue. He'd kept giving even when he had nothing. But it was the last discovery that finally broke her carefully maintained composure. Hidden in a routine insurance report was a single line item. Michael had been offered a full-time position at a prestigious dealership 8 months ago. He'd turned it down after learning they planned to close their low-income repair assistance program to cut costs. "You can't save everyone," the hiring manager had quoted him saying, "but you can choose not to hurt them." Sarah closed the files, her vision blurring. All this time, she'd thought she was the one testing character, looking for authenticity. In a world of facades, but Michael had been quietly demonstrating true character every day, not through grand gestures or public acclaim, but through consistent choices to maintain his integrity, even when it cost him everything. The newspaper clipping seemed to stare up at her accusingly. She had orchestrated elaborate scenarios to find genuine character, while Michael had been living it silently on the streets, helping others even when he had nothing, paying debts he could have legally walked away from, choosing integrity over comfort at every turn. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. Love isn't found in boardrooms or bank accounts. It's found in moments of truth, when masks fall away. Sarah picked up her phone, then set it down again. What could she possibly say? "I'm sorry I lied, but look what a hero you are." The very act of investigating his past felt like another violation of trust. But as she stared at the newspaper photo, at those clear eyes that had never lost their determination to do right by others, she knew she couldn't leave things as they were. The truth about Michael Bennett was too important to stay buried in old news clippings and financial reports. Sarah found Michael exactly where Tom said he would be, back at his corner near 4th Avenue. His toolkit sat beside him, the same one she'd first seen, but now it looked like a symbol of regression, a step backward she'd forced him to take. He saw her coming, of course he did, but this time there was no borrowed car, no carefully orchestrated breakdown, just her, wearing the power suit she'd hidden from him. The mask finally dropped. "Your people have been asking around about me," he said before she could speak. His voice was neutral, but his hands tightened on the toolkit. Background checks, financial history. Didn't think billionaires did their own dirty work, though. "I needed to understand," Sarah replied, stopping a respectful distance away. "And I couldn't ask you directly, not after lying about everything." His laugh held no humor. "Yeah, that does make conversation difficult." Sarah pulled the old newspaper clipping from her bag, held it so he could see the headline. Michael's expression flickered, surprise, then something darker. "You went looking for dirt and found that instead?" he asked quietly. I went looking for the truth, she corrected. I found a man who risked his life to save 3 people, who sold his home to protect his employees, who's been paying back debts he could have legally walked away from, even while living on the streets. Stop! Michael stood abruptly, shoving tools back into his kit. You don't get to use my past to make yourself feel better about what you did. That's not... Sarah stepped forward, then caught herself. You're right, I don't. Just like I don't get to decide which parts of my lie should matter to you. But Michael, nothing I learned made me feel better. It made me feel worse. Because I did exactly what everyone else in your life has done. I underestimated you. He stilled at that, one hand resting on his modified wrench, the tool that had started everything. You know what I kept thinking. Looking at all those records, Sarah continued, that I spent months playing games, trying to find someone genuine in a world of fake people. And there you were, living with more integrity from a street corner than most people manage from corner offices. Integrity doesn't keep you warm at night, Michael said, but there was less edge in his voice. Or pay off old debts. No, Sarah. Agreed. But it does apparently make you turn down a cushy dealership job because they were cutting services to low-income customers. This time, his head snapped up, genuine surprise in his eyes. How did you... I'm very good at research, she said simply, and I'm trying to be better at honesty. So here's the truth. I'm Sarah Morrison, CEO of Morrison Technologies. I'm worth billions on paper, and I hate most of it. I spend my days surrounded by people who want things from me, which is why I created this whole elaborate scheme to find someone real. She took a deep breath. And I found you. Then I lost you because I forgot that real things can't be built on fake foundations. Michael was silent for a long moment, studying her face as intently as he would study an engine problem. Finally, he reached into his toolkit and pulled out something she hadn't expected. The business card she'd given him that first day. You know what's funny? He said, turning the card over in his hands. This is probably the only fake thing. About that garage. The work was real. The people were real. The chance you gave me... He paused. That was real, too. It still is, Sarah said softly. If you want it, no more lies, no more games. Just a garage that needs someone who cares about more than the bottom line. And its billionaire owner. What does she need? Sarah touched her mother's pendant, drawing courage from it. She needs someone who'll see her for who she is, not what she owns. Someone who understands that integrity isn't about what you have, but what you do with it. They ended up at a small diner near the garage, neutral territory. Sarah sat across from Michael in her $1,000 suit while he still wore his work clothes, the contrast drawing curious glances from other patrons. Neither seemed to notice or care. Between them on the scratched formica table lay her mother's diary, a small leather-bound book that Sarah had never shown anyone else. She'd retrieved it from her office safe before coming to find him. My mother wrote this the year she was dying, Sarah explained, her fingers resting lightly on the worn cover. She knew she was leaving me not just a fortune, but a burden. She'd lived both lives, the struggling programmer's wife and then the tech mogul's partner. She understood what wealth does to truth. Michael's eyes went to the diary, but he didn't reach for it. Why are you showing me this? Because I need you to understand why I did what I did. Not to excuse it, but to explain. She opened the diary to a marked page. She wrote this 3 months before she died. My greatest fear. For Sarah isn't that she'll fail in business. She's brilliant at that. It's that she'll succeed so completely that she'll never know if people love her or just what she can give them. Michael's expression softened slightly. So you created a fake life to find real love. There's an irony there. I know, Sarah admitted. I thought I was being clever, but I was just proving I didn't trust anyone to see the real me, including you. She pushed the diary toward him. Read it. Any page. My mother documented everything, her fears, her hopes, the way money changed how people treated her, and her advice for finding truth in a world of pretense. Michael hesitated, then carefully opened the diary to a random page. His eyes moved. Over the handwritten words, "True character isn't found in grand gestures or careful presentations. It's in the small choices when nobody's watching. How someone treats those who can't help them, what they do with power over others." He looked up at Sarah. She was a wise woman. "She would have liked you," Sarah said softly. "Not the billionaire's carefully vetted prospect, but the man who fixes heaters for homeless families and turns down good jobs to protect strangers." Michael closed the diary gently. "I'm not a saint, Sarah. I made plenty of mistakes. Lost everything. Because I tried to save everyone. I know. I read about the fire, the insurance, the loans." She met his eyes. "I read about how you're still making payments on debts you could have escaped. That's the kind of person I was looking for. I just went about it all wrong." "The garage," Michael said after a moment. "The people there, were they part of your experiment?" Sarah shook her head. "No, I bought the garage after I met you, hired real mechanics, set up a real business. The only fake thing was me pretending to be a small business owner instead of a CEO. And now it's whatever you want it to be. You can come back as head mechanic, partner, whatever feels right, or you can walk away. I'll understand." Michael was quiet for a long time, his hands resting on the diary. Finally he said, "You know what the hardest part of living on the streets was? Not the cold or the hunger. It was losing my identity. I wasn't Michael Bennett, master mechanic, anymore. I was just another homeless man to avoid looking at." "The garage gave that back to you," Sarah said. "Yes, but not because of the tools or the workspace. Because for the first time in years, someone saw me. Really saw me." He pushed the diary back across the table, even if that someone was pretending to be something she wasn't. The board meeting minutes lay on the conference table like a declaration of war. Henderson had made sure every board member received a copy, detailed documentation of Sarah's inappropriate relationship with a homeless mechanic, complete with surveillance photos and financial records of the garage purchase. "This is beyond eccentric, Miss Morrison," Henderson said, his voice carrying the false concern of someone who smelled blood in the water. "The board has been patient with your unconventional approach to finding a partner, but this crosses several lines." Sarah sat at the head of the table, her posture relaxed despite the hostility radiating from the board members. She'd expected this moment, had prepared for it. What she hadn't expected was what happened next. The boardroom door opened and Michael walked in. He'd traded his work clothes for a clean button-down shirt and slacks, but he hadn't tried to hide who he was. His hands still showed the honest marks of his trade, and he carried himself with the quiet dignity that had first drawn Sarah's attention. "Mr. Bennett," Henderson said, his surprise quickly masked by condescension, "this is a private board meeting." "Actually," Sarah interjected smoothly, "I invited him. Since you've made my personal life a matter of board discussion, it seems only fair that all parties are represented." Michael took a seat halfway down the table, his eyes taking in the room with the same careful assessment he used when diagnosing engine problems. The board minutes sat in front of him, and he read them without reaction. "The board's concern," a senior member spoke up, "is not just about Miss Morrison's personal choices. It's about judgment, about the company's reputation. Surely you understand." "I understand reputation," Michael replied calmly. "I built one over 20 years of honest work, lost it through circumstances, but never stopped trying to live up to it." He looked directly at the board member. "What's your reputation built on?" The question hung in the air, uncomfortable in its directness. "Morrison Technologies was founded on innovation," Sarah added, her voice clear and confident. "My father started this company in a garage, working on used computers. He succeeded because he understood value isn't about appearance. It's about what works, what lasts, what makes a real difference." "That was different," Henderson protested. "Your father was a brilliant programmer, and Michael is a brilliant Mechanic, Sarah countered. One who turned down a prestigious position because it meant cutting services to people in need. One who continues paying debts he could have legally escaped, who helps others even when he has nothing himself. She leaned forward. Tell me, what better judgment could I show than choosing someone with that kind of integrity? The shareholders, Henderson began, would be interested to know, Michael interrupted quietly, that the garage you're so concerned about has turned a profit in its first quarter, that we've established a training program for at-risk youth, that our customer satisfaction ratings are the highest in the district. He smiled slightly. I may be just a mechanic, but I understand business well enough to know that success isn't just about the numbers on a spreadsheet. The board members exchanged glances. This wasn't the confrontation they'd expected. They'd anticipated drama, denial, perhaps even a scene. Instead, they faced the calm confidence of two people who knew exactly who they were and what they stood for. Sarah pulled out one final document, a detailed proposal for expanding the garage's model citywide, combining profitable high-end service with community outreach and vocational training. The numbers were solid, the social impact metrics impressive. You're right that this is about judgment, she told the board. About seeing value where others see liability. About understanding that real leadership means lifting people up, not looking down on them. She met each board member's eyes in turn. My father built this company on that principle. I intend to honor it, in business and in life. The silence that followed was broken by an unexpected source. The eldest board member, who had served since her father's time. He picked up the proposal, studied it, then looked at Michael with new respect. Thomas Morrison always said the best way to judge character was to look at what people did when they thought no one was watching, he said slowly. Perhaps it's time we remembered that. In the weeks following the board meeting, the garage transformed into something neither Sarah nor Michael had initially imagined. Their first joint business proposal lay open on the office desk, coffee stains and pencil marks showing how many times they'd revised it together, blending his practical experience with her business acumen. See this section? Michael pointed to a paragraph about apprenticeship programs. We need to adjust the timeline. Jenny's mother mentioned that most of the women at the shelter can't commit to full-time training. They need flexible hours, maybe weekend options. Sarah leaned over his shoulder, making notes. The distance between CEO and mechanic had dissolved into something more natural, partners solving problems together. We could split the programs, she suggested. One track for full-time students, another for parents and people with jobs. The proposal had evolved far beyond its original scope. What had started as a plan to expand the garage had grown into a comprehensive community development initiative. Michael's years on the street had given him insights no consultant could match, while Sarah's business experience helped make those insights actionable. The board's going to balk at these numbers, Sarah admitted, reviewing their budget projections. It's a bigger investment than we initially discussed. Michael smiled, pulling out a spreadsheet he'd prepared. It was detailed with the same precision. He brought to engine repairs, every number checked and double-checked. Show them this, he said, 5-year projections based on our current performance, factoring in the tax benefits of the training programs and the positive PR we're already getting. Sarah studied the document, impressed. When did you learn financial modeling? Been studying every night, he admitted. Found some online courses at the library. Figured if I'm going to be your partner in this, I need to speak both languages. Engines and economics. The word partner hung between them, carrying multiple meanings neither was quite ready to fully address. Instead, they focused on the work, on building something that could make a real difference. Their different worlds had begun to merge in unexpected ways. Sarah had installed a small workshop in her penthouse, where Michael taught her basic automotive maintenance between business strategy sessions. In return, she was helping him update his technical certifications, introducing him to hybrid and electric vehicle systems. You know, Sarah said, reviewing their proposal one last time, my father would have loved this. He always said business should be about more than profit. It should be about progress, about giving people the tools to build better lives. Michael nodded, thinking of his own past. Like when my first boss gave me a chance, taught me not just how to fix cars, but how to run a shop. He paused, remembering. Never thought I'd be on the other side of that equation. The proposal between them represented more than just a business plan. It was a bridge between their worlds. Proof that integrity and innovation, compassion and capitalism could coexist and even thrive together. Sarah watched Michael as he made one final adjustment to their budget calculations. The man who had once fixed her car on a street corner now moved confidently between spreadsheets and service bays, never losing either his humility or his determination to help others. "We should show this to Tom and the others first," Michael suggested. "Get their input before we take it back to the board. They're the ones who'll be helping to train people." Sarah agreed, touched by how he always thought of the team first. It was the same instinct that had made him take the blame for Ray's mistake, the same care for others that had defined his entire life. The proposal that would eventually reshape both their lives sat ready for submission, a testament to what it could happen when two people from different worlds stopped pretending and started building something real together. It started with a tweet. A customer had snapped a photo of Michael teaching a group of women from the shelter basic car maintenance, capturing the moment he helped Jenny's mother check her oil. The caption read, "This is the head mechanic at Complete Care Auto, teaching free classes to shelter residents. Same guy who used to fix their cars on the street. Now he runs the place with Morrison Tech CEO Sarah Morrison. Real change happens when people care. Second chances. Morrison Tech." The post exploded overnight. Local news picked up the story first. The homeless mechanic who never lost his integrity, the billionaire CEO who found love while searching for authenticity, the garage that had become a symbol of second chances, but it was the human element that caught fire. Sarah watched the social media storm build from her office, the viral post displayed on her tablet. "They're calling it a real-life fairy tale," she told Michael, who was reviewing applications for their expanded training program. "Fairy tales don't usually involve transmission fluid," he replied dryly, but his eyes softened as he read some of the responses. Former clients from his street days were coming forward, sharing stories of his kindness. Other businesses were reaching out, wanting to know how they could implement similar programs. The board, which had been skeptical of their partnership, now found themselves facing a wave of positive public sentiment. Morrison Tech's stock price rose as investors responded to the company's demonstrated commitment to social responsibility. Headlines praised the innovative approach to community investment and leadership that bridges social divides. But it was a handwritten letter that affected them most deeply. It came from a teenage boy whose father had lost his business in the recent recession. "When I saw your story," he wrote, "I showed my dad. He's been so ashamed of our situation. But seeing someone who kept their dignity, who got a second chance, it gave him hope. We're signing up for your next maintenance class together." The letter joined others on the garage's bulletin board, which had become a wall of hope. Notes from program graduates, photos of families with their repaired vehicles, news clippings about their growing impact. Each one represented a life touched, a story changed. "We're going to need a bigger space," Michael said one evening, watching another class graduate from their basic maintenance program. The garage was packed with families and friends, the atmosphere, more celebration than ceremony. Sarah nodded, already running numbers in her head. "I've been looking at properties. There's an old technical college building for sale on the east side. Good location, plenty of space for expansion." "Think bigger," Michael surprised her by saying. "If we're going to do this, let's do it right. Multiple locations. Partner with other garages. Build a network." She turned to look at him, this man, who had once been hesitant to accept help for himself, now planning to help hundreds. "What happened to "you can't save everyone"? Still can't," he admitted. But we can give them the tools to save themselves. Isn't that what you did for me? Gave me the tools, trusted me to use them right. Before Sarah could respond, Jenny, now one of their star apprentices, rushed up with her phone. "You've got to see this. Your story just got shared by some major influencers. People are calling it the revolution of second chances. They're saying it's changing how people think about homelessness, about judgment, about everything." The viral post that had started it all was now a movement. But as Sarah watched Michael return to teaching, showing a young mother how to spot warning signs in her engine, she knew the real revolution wasn't in the headlines or trending topics. It was in these quiet moments of empowerment, in the dignity of knowledge shared, in the simple truth that everyone deserves a chance to rebuild. 1 year later, Sarah stood beside Michael in front of their newest venture, the Bennett Morrison Center for Automotive Training and Community Development. The dedication plaque gleamed in the morning sun, their names side by side, a testament to how far they'd come. "Ready?" she asked, squeezing his hand. Michael nodded, his eyes moving over the gathered crowd. Jenny and her mother were there, along with dozens of other families he'd helped during his years on the street. Tom, Ray, and Maria stood with the other instructors, ready to begin classes in the newly equipped facility. Even Henderson had shown up, his initial skepticism long since replaced by genuine respect. The plaque's inscription read, "Everyone deserves a chance to rebuild." Sometimes all it takes is someone willing to look past the surface and see the potential within. Below these words was an etching of a simple toolkit, a reminder of where it all began. As Michael stepped up to the podium, he pulled out his old modified wrench, now mounted on a display stand. "This tool," he began, his voice carrying across the quiet crowd, "represents more than just fixing engines. It's about adapting to challenges, finding solutions where others see problems. A year ago, I was using it on street corners. Today, it's the first piece in our center's Museum of Innovation. A reminder that ingenuity and integrity can survive any circumstance." Sarah watched him speak, remembering the man who had been hesitant to accept help, who had turned down better opportunities because they meant abandoning his principles. Now he stood confident, a leader who hadn't just reclaimed his own dignity, but was helping others find theirs. "We're not just teaching automotive skills here," Michael continued. "We're teaching resilience, hope, the belief that your circumstances don't define your worth." He looked at Sarah, a smile touching his eyes. "And sometimes we're teaching billionaire CEOs that the best investments aren't found in boardrooms, but in believing in people when they've stopped believing in themselves." After the ceremony, they walked through the center together. State-of-the-art, diagnostic equipment shared space with basic tools, reflecting their belief that everyone should have access to both fundamental skills and advanced technology. The walls were lined with stories, photographs and testimonials from people whose lives had been changed by their program. In Michael's office, his old toolkit had a place of honor beside his renewed ASE certifications and the framed article about the garage fire. Sarah's mother's pendant lay next to them, a wedding gift she'd given him to carry, symbolizing the trust that had grown between them. "You know," Sarah said, touching the pendant gently, "when I started that ridiculous scheme to find someone genuine, I never imagined it would lead here. Here, being married to a former homeless mechanic and running a community training center," Michael teased. "Here, being exactly where I'm supposed to be," she corrected. "My mother would have loved this, using wealth to create real change, finding love that's based on who we are, not what we have." Michael picked up his old business card from Complete Care Auto, now framed alongside their center's new cards. "Sometimes the best things start with a lie," he mused, "as long as they end with the truth." Outside their office, the sounds of the first class getting underway filtered through, excited voices, tools being distributed, futures beginning to change. Sarah and Michael shared a look of quiet satisfaction. They had built something real together, something that would last. The dedication plaque caught the afternoon sun, their names united in purpose as they were in life. It would stand as a reminder that second chances aren't just about starting over. They're about building something better, something true, something that helps others find their way back to who they were meant to be.